I made new Pikmin designs for the upcoming Pikmin 4 based on the elemental types from the Pokemon series. Let's see how that turned out. For this video, I made new Pikmin designs. I made them with pixel art because I'm not that good of an artist. But I wanted to be inspired by the Pokemon series and kind of have my creative juices flow, so I made all 18 Pokemon types as Pikmin. I kept it very simple. So all Pikmin will be one type only. To make my job a little bit easier, I went through all of the existing Pikmin already and assigned types to those Pikmin. So I will not be making new ones based on the existing types already. For the first three Pikmin, which are the red Pikmin, the blue Pikmin, and the yellow Pikmin, they are of course fire type, water type, and electric type. And this is because they resist those elements and are clearly color coded to be that element. They can also use the attacks of those elements in Super Smash Bros. For example, the red Pikmin I think can breathe fire or something like that for some reason. So that covered. Next up is the white Pikmin introduced in Pikmin 2, I think, which has a lot of features that could go either way what type you want to give it. First of all, it resists poison, and if an enemy creature eats this Pikmin, they become poison and take some damage out of it. But also, it can apparently dig up some treasure, so it could also go for the ground type, but because of the poison factor, I would give it the poison type. Next up is the purple Pikmin, also introduced in Pikmin 2, which is a buff purple Pikmin, and it is one of the best attackers in the game. So that's why I think it could be best to give it the fighting type. Next up is a little bit of an obscure Pikmin called the Puffmin. This is also known as the Mushroom Pikmin. It's basically a Pikmin that has been taken over and kind of zombified by this evil mushrooms, and the spores do the Last of Us on a Pikmin, and the Pikmin becomes half mushroom. Now, these Pikmin can also be cured if the mushroom is defeated or just it is shaken off. So it is not exactly like The Last of Us, but pretty close. But the interesting thing about here is that when they are taken over by the mushroom, they turn on Olimar, or whoever is the player character at the moment, and the other Pikmin. So it becomes evil, which I think would make this a dark type Pikmin. Now, next up is Pikmin actually taking over other creatures. We have Bulbamin, which is based on the red Bulborb, which is a regular type of an enemy that you see often in Pikmin games. Now, Bulborbs are supposed to be this kind of a stand-in for a regular mammal, a predator, just normal animals in the Pikmin ecosystem just happen to eat Pikmin. So the Red Orbs being kind of the default enemy, I think this could be a normal type because it's just a Pikmin taking over a creature that I think in the Pokemon world would be a normal type. Moving on to Pikmin 3 Pikmin, and surprisingly to everyone watching, the Rock Pikmin would probably be a rock type. Shocking, I know. Pikmin 3 also introduced the winged Pikmin, which you might think, okay, it has wings. It's flying type. I disagree. And I think it's pink. You know it's pink. So I think it could go also for the fairy type. And I think, yeah, it does look like fairy type. And also I have better ideas for a flying type Pikmin. So let's just push that to the fairy type. Now, the one last Pikmin that we have that was just announced for Pikmin 4 is the Ice Pikmin. And this, much like the Rock Pikmin, is very shocking that it is Ice type. Wow. So, now that we have those covered quickly, let's move on to the new Pikmin I have designed. Now, it is to be said, I am no artist. I'm actually a designer, but I don't do the art. So, I did some basic pixel art to kind of portray how this Pikmin could look, but I'm not skilled enough to do like 3D models or anything that looks good. So let's start off with grass, because I know that you've been thinking about, okay, if Pikmin are not grass types, then what would a grass type Pikmin look like? Well, here's the answer. Now you can see it's a green Pikmin that doesn't have any legs and is living in a flower pot. Now this is a very special kind of Pikmin that I think would bring some really unique factors into the actual gameplay of Pikmin. Because it cannot move with you, other Pikmins would have to carry it around. Might sound like a bad Pikmin, but you might notice the mouth looks a bit familiar, doesn't it? Reminds you of the thing from Plants vs. Zombies. I can't remember what's called at the moment. But yeah, it is supposed to be exactly like that. It is kind of a pea shooter Pikmin. So it shoots projectiles or seeds at enemies. So it's a Pikmin that can attack enemies from afar, and other Pikmin can place it wherever you want it to be placed in, and it kind of works as a turret. So you can use it as very efficiently when it comes to combat, and also some puzzles where you have to hit faraway things. So I think this could be very interesting. Then, next up we have flying type, and this is one of my favorite designs that I made for this video. Since a Pikmin that can fly that already exists, it isn't enough for a flying type Pikmin, I think, so we need to do something else that really portrays that this is the flying type Pikmin. So here it is, looking like a bird. So, what I thought about for gameplay wise, I thought it couldn't really attack well. It has weak attack, but because it has large wings, it could kind of work like the Korok leaf in Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. While it cannot attack well, it can push enemies. So if you're like in a narrow space near a cliff or something, then you could just push enemies to their death. But of course, it can also be used in some wind-based puzzles, so that would be cool. Next up, we have the bug type Pikmin, and this Pikmin kind of looks like a beetle. Gameplay-wise, it would be able to crawl on walls, kind of like the white Pikmin is able to dig up and search for treasures. This Pikmin could go up walls and find useful materials and such. Combat-wise, this Pikmin would be very hard for enemies to shake off, so it would stay attached to those enemies until you call them off, which is, I think, a very useful ability in some cases. Then we have the psychic type Pikmin. It's a blue Pikmin with a yellow circle, kind of like a gold bracelet, which is often linked with having psychic powers, and of course the third eye, which is even more linked with having psychic powers. It has the power to levitate items, and including stuff that Olimar is on, I think could be very interesting for exploration and maybe even combats. You could throw things at enemies, if even possible at all. But yeah, and combat-wise, it could also maybe levitate enemies a bit, so they would be easier to hit and maybe stun them occasionally. Then moving on to another interesting one, which is the ghost Pikmin. Now, if you have ever played Pikmin, you probably have already seen a ghost of a Pikmin. So for this design, I wanted to kind of have like a middle ground between the ghost that we see in the game and a regular Pikmin. And this is the final design. Kind of looks like a between of those two, I feel like, and I kind of like the idea of it only having one eye is being so scarred with battle. But yeah, what does this Pikmin do? Not much, actually. It's kind of a weak Pikmin. It's not really useful in combat, and that kind of sucks, but it can still be used in like puzzles and carrying things around. How I imagined you getting this Pikmin is that if your Pikmin falls in battle or is killed, they have the smallest chance of actually turning into a ghost Pikmin. And if you bring it back to the Onion, or whatever the weird spaceship thing it is, I think it's called the Onion. I'm not the biggest Pikmin Professional, so I'm not completely sure. If you bring it back to that thing, it can be revived and used again as a normal Pikmin, which is great. Next up, we only have a few more left, and this is the Steel type Pikmin. It's Pikmin, but a robot. But you might be looking at, hey, well, what's going on with its head? It looks a bit weird. Well, there's actually a bomb inside its head. I don't know, for some reason I just wanted to make a Pikmin that explodes. That's fun. So yeah, this Pikmin attacks by exploding itself. It doesn't do any damage to itself, but when killed, when defeated, this causes like a major explosion that really damages the enemy quite a lot. Kind of like the white Pikmin poisons the enemy, but this does just massive physical damage. And this can of course be used in puzzles to easily get rid of like rocks or something. So you can just blow them up. But of course, because it has a bomb in its head, it's very, very weak to fire elemental attacks. Okay, almost the final one. This is the ground type Pikmin. And I had some troubles with this one as well, because I was imagining, okay, you can just dig up treasures underground. That was my first idea, but then I read about the white Pikmin that can already do that. So how do I make it even more ground-ish than the white Pikmin? And that is, of course, making it look like a ground type animal of sorts, a mole. So it's a mole kind of a Pikmin. This Pikmin is always seen partly underground, kind of like the Pokemon Diglett, which is really funny. And it never comes out, and this Pikmin can actually have kind of a unique attack, because it attacks by creating small earthquakes, which can make enemies trip up if you have enough of these Pikmin, which can be very useful in some battles if you have, for example, a very quick enemy against you that you have a trouble of, shooting Pikmin at it. You can just have these Pikmin around, make it trip up, create an earthquake, and then you can send a Pikmin to attack it much better. And of course, while it is based on a ground, it cannot hit any flying enemies, which is a bit of a nerf, but it makes sense for this Pikmin, doesn't it? Okay, and the last one. And this is the Pikmin that I struggled with the most when it comes to what do I even do with it. I kind of knew what I was going for with the design, but gameplay wise I was a bit blocked. I had no idea. And then I realized I could make it a really, really interesting, powerful Pikmin. This is the dragon type, the final one that we're going to cover. So what do you exactly do with a dragon Pikmin? Was like, I had no ideas. We already have a Pikmin that can technically breathe fire. We have a few Pikmin that can fly. Those are the main two things you think about when you think about what abilities do dragons have. But then I thought about, hey, in the Pokemon series, dragons are usually something very grand. They're legendary even. And they're usually very strong. So what if I just make a strong Pikmin that is kind of large? It is a huge Pikmin used specifically in like the final boss battle, where after all of that you've been through, all this trouble and rough fights that you have to endure, then you get this huge Pikmin. All of the Pikmin before have been like really tiny beside your side, but this Pikmin is the same size as the final boss, and you can command it yourself. You command it to attack, and then you finally beat the final boss. I think a legendary type like the dragon type would be the best for like a hype moment like this. And it would just be like the indestructible Pikmin, that it would be really strong and you could kick the ass of the final boss and finally win, and that would just be like a mind-blowing experience. So yeah, that's what I have for the dragon type. I hope you really like the designs I made in this video. Click like, click subscribe if you really want to see more from me, something like this, maybe new Pokemon or maybe new Mario enemies, whatever, let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.